Friends, welcome back. I'm here now to discuss the last and the final unit of Victorian period. There we will discuss Victorian novel and Victorian essays. Let me discuss with you first the novel which was prescribed for TYBA English paper 7 is David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, and Dickens' most popular novels and was his own favorite child. Charles Dickens is somewhere, his picture is visible in this novel. The work is autobiographical, semi-autobiographical, but it is a real story of Charles Dickens. This is what I feel. Although the title character differs from his creator in many ways, Dickens related earlier his personal experiences that had meant much to him, his work in a factory, his schooling, his life, and more curiosity of his emergence from parliamentary reporting as a writer, correspondent, into successful novel writing profession. David also a writer, Dickens also a writer. Yes, the story is told in the first person by a middle-aged David Copperfield who is looking back on his life. David is born in Blunderstone 6 months after the death of his father, and he is raised by his mother and her devoted housemaid Clara Pigotti. Remember her name, Clara Pigotti. As a young child, he spends a few days with Peggotty at the home of her brother, Mr. Peggotty, in Yarmouth. Later which Mr. Peggotty shares with Ham and Emily, his orphaned nephew and niece respectively. When the visit ends, David learns that his mother has married a cruel person and a controlling and a cruel personality, controlling the family or David and his mother. His name is Edward Murdstone's That evening, Murdstone's sister also moves in and assumes the management of the household. This fellow Edward married David's mother because of her estate. We can see people marry sometime for their own benefits. Here we can see this Edward Murdstone took the opportunity. One day Mr. Murdstone takes David to his bedroom and beats him, and David bites his hand and runs away. After that, the 8-year-old David is sent to a boarding school which was run by a sadistic, cruel fellow, Mr. Crickle in name. There David becomes friend with other kind of students, street fast Tommy toddlers, and with the charismatic and entitled James T. Fourth. Though David's second semester at the school, his mother dies shortly after giving birth to a son, who also dies later. Since Mr. Edward is a cruel fellow, may not have taken care of David's mother and the baby, so both of them dead. After that, Peggotty is dismissed from the house which belongs to David's mother, and she marries Mr. Burkis, who drives a cart wagon. David is not returned to school, and at the age of 10, he is sent to work at Murdstone's wine bottling factory in London. This cruel fellow sends this young small boy to work in a wine factory. He lodges at the home of Mr. and Mrs. Macabre, a generous couple who are constantly facing financial problems. Eventually, Mr. Macabre is sent to debtor's prison. Unable to pay his debts, so he was sent to prison. After which David runs away to Dover to find his great aunt, the self-sufficient Miss Betsy Trotwood, and on the advice of her simple-minded and good-hearted Mr. Dick, she takes him in. Miss Betsy arranges for Davids to go to school run by Dr. Strong and to stay with her business manager. Mr. Wickfield and his daughter Agnes, working for Mr. Wickfield in an off-putting teenage clerk named Uri Heap, his name, Uri Heap. After David completes his schooling, he goes to visit Peggotty. On the way to Yarmouth, David encounters Steerforth, and together they visit Peggotty and Mr. Peggotty. Emily engaged to Ham is announced, but she appears interested in Steerforth. After agreeing to Miss Betsy's idea that he should become a proctor, a type of assistant attorney, David begins an apprenticeship at London office of Spenlow and Jerkins. It's the office, name of the office. People, generally names are proper names they keep for their official venue. He maintains his friendship with Steerforth, though Agnes Wickfield disapproves. He is reacquainted with Uriah Heep, who is about to become Wickfield's partner and who intends to marry Agnes. One day, Spenlow invites David to his home, and David becomes infatuated with Spenlow's childlike daughter, Dora. Mr. Spenlow's childlike daughter, Dora. David finds that Traddles is now a border with Mr. and Mrs. Micawber. Upon learning that Burkis is on the point of death, he returned to Armouth. After Burkis' funeral, Emily runs away with Steerforth, and Mr. Peggotty vows to find her. David returns to London and becomes engaged to Dora. Miss Betsy unexpectedly arrives with the news that she has been financially ruined as a result of Uriah Heep's partnership with Wickfield. To add to his income, David begins working for Dr. Strong as a secretary. Personal secretary like stenographers, typists, everything like writer. And at Trottler's suggestion, he starts reporting on parliamentary debates for newspaper. He works for a newspaper also as a correspondence reporter. Later he also started writing small stories, fictions, poems, etc. and became later a famous novelist. Uriah Heep hires Mr. Micawber as a clerk. Eventually, David marries Dora after she suffers a miscarriage. She never regains her strength and she dies. We know this Spenlow's daughter Dora. During this time, Emily returns to London after being abandoned in Naples by Steerforth. One day, Mr. Micawber, in concert with David and Troddlers, who is now a lawyer, confronts Uriah Heep with detailed evidence that he has been cheating Wickfield and was responsible for Miss Betsy's losses. Mr. Heep is required to return the money. Plans are there when Mr. and Mrs. Micawber to join Mr. Peggotty and Emily when they immigrate to Australia to make a fresh start their life in Australia. Ahead of the departure, David goes to Yarmouth to deliver a letter from Emily to Ham. But a dangerous storm arises. Nature turns, changes anytime. Several ships were lost, wrecked in waters. Some ships sunk, and one shipwreck occurs close enough to shore that Ham tries to swim out and save the last two survivors. Ham drowns, and when the body of one of the sailors is washed ashore, it proves to be Steerforth. David spends the next 3 years in continental Europe, and when he returns, later he marries Agnes. Friends, summarizing such a big novel, so many chapters, so many characters, I think you must read the novel and understand. Many things have been some brief. It is just a brief and revision. This is how one can understand the play. The novel of this Victorian age. Hope you would have understood this to your satisfaction. Thank you. Please give the feedback so that I can make some efforts to make small lectures on different topics. Whichever topics you are interested, please let me inform so that I can make my efforts to contribute from my side as an academician. Thank you for being with me. Bye bye. See you shortly.